Reports are saying a 16-team college football playoff could be on the way soon, and the Indiana Hoosiers would be huge winners if that happens.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, thank you so much for being here. Shout out to all of my everydayers who truly make this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. The Indiana basketball team offers yet another 2027 recruit. And this time, it's another top 10 player from the state of Texas. We'll talk about him. Plus, how can Indiana football benefit from this whole idea of a 16-team college football playoff? Because reports are saying it could be on the way very, very soon. On3 started tweeting about it. Ross Dellinger started talking about it. And then everybody started picking up on this kind of late last week on this idea that a 16-team college football playoff is starting to, quote, gain support from those in the SEC and in the Big Ten. And we know that these two major conferences, who have been the best at college football for quite some time, they have their spring meetings coming up at the end of May. And so it's starting to gain momentum, which means they're going to talk about it. And these reports are saying that a decision could come in the next couple of months. Let's slow down on this for just a second, because there's a lot to break down here, because you feel like the college football playoff just expanded, right? Well, that's because it did. We just had our first ever 12-team college football playoff after playing a 4-team college football playoff for a decade, right? And we knew this was coming. We knew that this was going to happen. This is not a surprise to anybody that a 16-team or just an expanded playoff again is on the brain of the biggest conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, because they would absolutely benefit from this new expanded system. Why? Because listen to this. The growing support of what a 16-team bracket would look like is pretty obvious, because you would have 4 guaranteed spots for the SEC, 4 guaranteed spots for the Big Ten. You'd have 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, 1 group of 6, and 3 at large. So the 2 biggest conferences with the best teams who bring in the most money would get the most teams in the playoff. Makes sense to me. Now, Big 12 fans are upset, but they can't put out good enough football to actually get more teams in the playoffs, so they can be upset and they'll be okay. ACC is the same way. Thank the Lord we didn't have 4 guaranteed teams in the ACC in the playoff last year. The ratings would have plummeted and historically been the worst they've ever been, right? So it makes sense from a money standpoint why the Big Ten and the SEC would get more teams. I'm not going to go out and say that I agree with the whole guaranteed number of teams thing, but you understand, or at least I do, and hopefully I can portray that to you, the fact that the Big Ten and the SEC bring in more money than any other conference could even think about. They want those teams in the playoff. They want the big names, the big brands. They want them on TV. They want them on radio. They want them all over the place. So that way they can generate the most revenue and make the most money. Because don't ever forget, ladies and gentlemen, don't ever forget what this is all about. College football playoff, NCAA tournament, college baseball, any of it. It's all about the money. That's all it is. It's all it's ever been. It's all it's ever will be. And I hate that. I hate that idea, but it is what it is. That's what an expanded playoff would do, is fill the pockets of those in charge, of those people at the top. It is what it is. But folks, Indiana would benefit from this greatly. Greatly, Indiana would benefit from this, because we already benefited from an expanded college football playoff. I'm not willing to go as far and say that Indiana benefited from the initial college football playoff because that was never really in the realm of possibilities of Indiana making a 4-team college football playoff. That we never thought that that was physically possible, right? But then this whole 12-team playoff thing came around and we were like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." But never did we think, "Oh yeah, we're gonna make that year one. We're gonna consistently compete for that. We're gonna be a playoff team this year." No, we had no idea, and that's just being truthful because we had a brand new head coach with a brand new team, a brand new coaching staff, a brand new everything. We had no idea what we were getting into, and it would have been borderline witchcraft for you to say, "Oh yeah, year one, Kurt Signetti, Hoosier going to the playoff. We got it. Yep, they got it. They're gonna win. They're gonna win big, and they're gonna go to the college football playoff year one." That was idiotic to predict that. So by no means am I saying that we were the beneficiary of that initially. But last year, we absolutely were the beneficiary of an expanded playoff because if it was a 4-team playoff, we wouldn't have gotten in. If it was a 6 or an 8-team playoff, we may not have gotten in. But since it was a 12-team playoff, we got in. And now you start talking about a 16-team college football playoff, we absolutely would have been in. And more importantly, moving forward, we would have a great chance of getting in as long as Kurt Signetti keeps Indiana football relevant and keeps winning games and makes this program continue to climb and competitive in the Big Ten. So while I don't like the idea of the expanded playoff, and it's just going to keep expanding, let's go ahead and prepare for that. They're not going to stop at 16 because they didn't stop at 4. They didn't stop at 12, apparently, reportedly, supposedly. And they're not going to stop at 16. They're going to get this thing as big as they can and make it to as close of a college basketball tournament as they can. If they could put 64, 68 teams in this thing, they would. They won't, they can't, but they're going to try. And I just think that a 16-team college football playoff is not my favorite. I don't love the idea of guaranteed bids, but the SEC and the Big Ten support it for obvious reasons. And Indiana would no doubt about it benefit from this idea, from a 4 teams guaranteed from the Big Ten, because in a moment we're going to look at the standings from a year ago plus the schedule coming up this year and kind of how all that ties together. Listen to this part before we step aside for a second. Not only would all these teams and these conferences have guaranteed bids, this would also come with season-ending interleague play-in games. This is from Ross Dellinger. Season-ending play-in games within the conference. 3rd place versus 6th place, 4th place versus 5th place. So the 3rd place team would play the 6th place team. The 4th place team would play the 5th place team. They would then get in as the automatic bid. Think about how wild that is for just a second, because we're going to look at last year's Big Ten standings. I'm going to tell you who those teams would have been, and it would have gotten wild in this conference. More of that coming up in just a second here on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL or the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Hey, best 2 teams in the East apparently are pushed to the brink, right? Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you think a player's going to show up and have a big night, whether it's scoring, whether it's his PRA, his points, right, or his rebounds, or his assists, or whether you think he's just going to have a good game overall, you can bet on that with FanDuel. And if you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same-game parlay, a live same-game parlay? You can do all of that on FanDuel, right? So if you're new to FanDuel, It's perfect. The perfect time to sign up. Head to fanduel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Again, that's your first $5 bet. If it wins, they're going to give you $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into a Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. Remember, basketball coming up in the final segment as the Hoosiers offer a 2027 top 10 recruit. Again, Darren DeVries and his staff are on a roll. They are getting out in front of things, and we'll talk about who that is and why he is a must-get for the Hoosiers. But for this Indiana football team, in terms of their benefiting from a 16-team college football playoff, they absolutely would. They absolutely would benefit from it because by no means are Indiana fans expecting the Hoosiers to go 10 wins every single season and make a 12-team playoff. That's just not realistic. Not yet, anyway. Could be down the road, but not yet. Let's not get too big for our britches here. But if you expand the playoff and you make it into 16 or 24 or whatever the numbers would say, then yeah, you absolutely benefit from that because the Hoosiers consistently aren't going to finish in the top two of the conference every single year. That's just not where we are yet. And I'm speaking in the present. Could this change in the future? Absolutely. But I'm speaking in the present right now. And I think most people would agree with me. That's not a crazy statement to say. So the more guaranteed spots that a conference like the Big Ten could get, the better chance the Hoosiers have to make it. And if there are 4 guaranteed spots who would make it into the college football playoff, then Indiana would be, you would think, in a pretty good spot. And remember how I said there's 4 guaranteed spots, but there would be play-in games to get those guaranteed spots where the 3rd place team would play the 6th place team, the 4th place team would play the 5th place team. Well, look at last year's conference standings at the end of the season. Want to know how this turned out? Okay. Want to know how this turned out? Oregon was 1. They went undefeated. Indiana was 2. They went 8-1. So we were good. We were in. We were fine no matter what in this new format. But listen to this. Here's your 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th place. Penn State, Ohio State, Illinois, and Iowa. So Penn State would have played Iowa. Ohio State would have played Illinois. Would those games have been the most exciting? Maybe, maybe not. But in the SEC, in this idea, you would have had LSU play Alabama to get into the college football playoff out of the SEC. That's pretty remarkable. That's a cool matchup. And while the ones in the Big Ten wouldn't have been the most sexy, the most exciting, the most engaging, it could set up that way in the future. Imagine if Michigan had gotten in there somewhere. They only needed one more game after beating Ohio State. They could have been in that, quote, play-in game a year ago. If USC decides they want to be good, I doubt it, but Michigan State or UCLA or any of the Wisconsin, any of these teams, or let's be real, Indiana could be in one of these play-in games. At least you get the opportunity to grab one of those guaranteed spots. And again, I'm not a fan of this expansion. I'm not a fan of more teams and gimmies and handouts and everybody's a winner type of thing and participation trophies. But in a vacuum, in a side set conversation, just in a vacuum, these play-in games would be awesome. They would be incredible. This would be such great entertainment. And that's what they're looking for. That's what TV is looking for. That's what ESPN and Fox and NBC, that's what they want. They want games like that because they know you and I and the entire country would be tuned in. But you can't tell me that Penn State and Iowa wouldn't be fun, or Ohio State and Illinois. Winner is in, loser is out of the playoff. It's a true play-in game. That's incredible. That could be really, really fun. And I have no idea. I don't think they said it in here, whether those would be on campuses, whether that would be on a neutral site. My guess would be neutral site, but I honestly have no idea. But you know what that means. If you're going to have a full regular season conference schedule and you're going to have 4 teams competing in a play-in game and you're going to have teams competing in more games in a college football playoff cycle, conference championship games, they're gone. They're going to leave. They're going to be gone. They're going to be non-existent. Why? Because they won't be relevant. They won't be needed. Teams won't play in them because of all these other games, which if you've been watching or listening to this show for quite some time, you know that I've been telling you that. You know that I've been saying conference championship games in college football are on their way out because they clearly don't mean a whole lot. They clearly aren't worth it for the teams that compete in them. And if you're going to add more games to a season for a team like Indiana, if they do happen to punch their ticket to Indianapolis, they're going to say, no, thanks, we're good. Or at least they should. They're going to say, nope, we're good. We'll pass on that. We got a play-in game to go to. We appreciate the offer, though. And Indiana could realistically be in this spot this upcoming season. It's not implemented this season, but just playing into this role for a second, Indiana could be here very, very often if a 16-team playoff were to exist in terms of being third, fourth, fifth, or sixth in the conference. And then you're at a play-in game for a spot in the college football playoff. So would it benefit the Hoosiers? Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. And for obvious reasons, the SEC and the Big Ten support this idea. And for obvious reasons, the ACC and the Big 12 are crying about it because they're not getting the representation that they want. But I'm sorry, the conferences are not what they used to be. All the best teams in the Big 12 don't play there anymore. The ACC sucks. So why would you get equal representation if you can't hang with the big dogs? And I'm not saying I agree with that idea. I'm just saying it's a fact. It's a factual idea, clearly. I'm not the only one that thinks that. The powers that be in college football and ESPN and television and media, they're telling you the same thing. 2 conferences are going to get 4 teams guaranteed. 2 conferences are only going to get 2. They're literally telling you that on a piece of paper right in front of your face because it's true. And I do ultimately think that this idea of a group of 6 and then the at-large and things like that, I think all that's going to go away because I do think these major conferences are eventually going to split off and the best teams from the best conferences are going to go create their own super conference and they're going to create their own college football playoff and their own college football league and do whatever. And it's going to be a major cluster. It is. It's going to be wild. But I think that's what's coming down the track. But in terms of just this idea, the Hoosiers would be winners here. We would absolutely benefit 1,000% from this. And so I'm not saying Hoosiers fans should be cheering for this idea, but if it does come to fruition, don't be upset from an Indiana perspective. From a college football perspective, you could be upset about it all you want. I am, clearly. But talking about the Hoosiers, talking about Indiana, we kind of want this. We do. We kind of want it because it gives a team like us a little bit of grace, if you will. It gives a team like us a little bit of not flexibility, but you're able to take a loss or two. You're able to not have to be perfect every single college football season, where the BCS you had to, the 4-team playoff you basically had to. And as the the playoff gets bigger and expands and more teams get in, the more lenient the restrictions are on getting in. I don't like that, but that's reality. And it would benefit the Hoosiers in this situation. I would much rather, though, let me make this clear. I would much rather the Hoosiers go 10-2 and make the playoff legitimately than going 9-3 or 8-4 and getting a bid somehow, some way, whether it's automatic play in, whatever, and squeak our way in. Let me make that very clear. I want to win games. I want to earn it. I want there to be no doubt that the Hoosiers belong in a college football playoff. It was that way a year ago, and I want it to be that way moving forward. But it can't be that way every year. And sometimes you'll benefit from squeaking in and the expansion of the playoff helping you. The Hoosiers could be there. The Hoosiers could be all over this thing. So if this does come to fruition, which it sounds like it's going to, just remember, Indiana will be winners with an expanded college football playoff. All right, coming up on our final segment on Locked On Hoosiers, flipping over to basketball because Darren DeVries, they do it again. They offer another top 10 player in the class of 2027. We'll talk about him, why he's important, and how he could end up as an Indiana Hoosier next, right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, man, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, man. Just swipe the card, tap the card, stick it in with the chip. I mean, it's easy to lose track of what you're spending, right? And that's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps where you've got your checking account over here, your savings account over there, your investments on this app, and you signed up for some other app that you don't even know about. Why wouldn't you not just want to put that all in one spot where you'd get one click, shows you everything, and you can manage it all right there? You can use Monarch to do all of that, checking your finances, tracking your spending, and even planning your long-term goals. And if you're trying to do those things with a partner, you can do that too by collaborating on Monarch, to where you can track shared and personal accounts, set your goals, and stay on the same page without the mess and stress. Okay, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you so much again for being here. And if you're listening on audio, your various podcasting platforms, Spotify, Pandora, Apple, whatever it may be, thank you so much for being there and listening, and really appreciate your support on those sites and those apps and those platforms. And so if you would, make sure that you're following us over there and that you subscribe if you're able to, and have those notifications turned on, so every time we post a new episode, it comes right to your phone. Okay, so be sure that you do that. Send it to everybody that you know. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you are subscribe to the channel, as we are on our way to 5,800 subscribers. So thank you so much for that. And make sure you comment your thoughts down below. I want to get your thoughts on all of this, the college football playoff, Indiana football in general. Just let me know your thoughts, your excitement for the upcoming season. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. And then like the video if you haven't already. Just hit the thumbs up, helps us out, tells me you like what's going on over here, and that we can continue doing what we're doing. So thank you so much for your support. It really does mean a lot. All right, so flipping over to basketball, because we've talked a lot of recruiting in terms of Indiana making offers, Indiana getting visits, Indiana hopefully getting some commits here in just a few, I don't know, days, weeks, months, years, whatever the case may be. Soon, we'll go with. We're hoping Indiana can get some commits soon. But we talked a little bit yesterday about how the Hoosiers are not just working in 2026, which we believe and I think is really your first true opportunity for Darren DeVries to prove himself in terms of his first true cycle as the coach of the Hoosiers. But we talked yesterday, and are going to talk again today, about this idea that they're already working for the future too. They're already putting in work for the class of 2027. And they do so again by offering a top 10 player in the class from 2027, Ryan Hampton. A lot of you in the recruiting circles, or just in the recruiting world, you've heard of this guy. You've heard of his name. You know where he's from. You understand how good of a player that he is. I told you, he's a top 10 player consensus. No matter where you look, he is a top 10 player in the class of 2027. 6'6", 190 pounds, plays on the wing, can play as a big guard, plays as a small forward, could play as a maybe an undersized power forward, but I think 2 or 3 is where he's going to live. 6'6", 190 pounds, from the class of 2027, and he's from Dallas, Texas. Okay, 4-star no matter where you look. He's a top 10 player. One of the best players in the state of Texas, one of the best small forwards in the country, and he received a scholarship offer from Indiana. They talked to him. Darren DeVries offered him a scholarship, and boom, he is now offered to Indiana. Other places that have offered him a scholarship that are going to be in the running here: Arizona State, Oklahoma State, Auburn is in there, SMU is in there. And so keep that in mind. Tennessee, I believe, is in there as well. And so big names are already on this kid, and it's only going to grow. But I will continue to stress the idea that the Hoosiers are working for the future. Darren DeVries understands you can't just go 1 year at a time, Woodson. You have to go and get relationships built for the future. And I saw some response to our conversation yesterday and people saying that they don't think relationships matter in high school recruiting anymore, that it's just all about who's going to stroke the biggest check or bring the biggest bag. I disagree. I do. I disagree because I have the benefit of working with high school athletes and calling high school games for these guys, and I get to talk to them quite often about what it means to them and what the recruiting process is like. And no, they're not openly going to talk about the money side of things, but they make decisions based off of where they're going to be the most comfortable, on the coaches that relate to them the most, on the system that's going to benefit them the most, on the campus, on the teammates, on the people that are in a particular system. Money is a driving factor, yes, but the other things have to be aligned for the money to be the final decision, if that's what the case may be, right? You can't just say, well, we're not going to talk to you. We're not going to show you on campus. We're not going to tell you anything about what we do, but we can offer you a lot of money. And most players aren't going to do that. Most players aren't going to take that and run with it. And if they do, it doesn't really work out all that often. So take somebody like a Ryan Hampton. You go in and you start building this relationship with a top 10 player who is an incredible scorer, by the way, and believe it or not, actually prides himself on his defense in today's era of high school basketball. It's a miracle, right? Especially on the AAU circuit. But instead of you just saying, well, we'll offer you a scholarship and we'll be one of the 50 schools that offer you. And yeah, we can give you some good NIL money, but, hopefully he picks us. Hopefully he comes here. Rather than that, Darren DeVries and the staff are saying, nah, we're going to make relationships. We're going to try and get you on campus. We're going to give you phone calls. We're going to do everything we can to get you here, because not only do we want you here as a freshman, we want you here as a sophomore and a junior. And then we want to watch you grow and blossom and get to the NBA and represent Indiana basketball. So then that can represent what we can do, and that will lead to more recruits in the future. I'm telling you, relationships matter. And offering scholarships, I know, isn't just world-beating news. It's not the craziest thing because it doesn't mean a visit. It doesn't mean a commit. You're absolutely right about that. But it's step one. It's step one. You're taking the first step in this long recruiting process, having the phone calls, having the conversations, and extending a scholarship offer. And you're not the first, but you're not the last. And you're not going to be thrown in the middle of all of this. Indiana will be a player for a guy like him, and you want to be, because of how talented he is. He can shoot. He runs the floor like a deer. And as I said, his defense, because of his insane wingspan, he's really, really talented and only going to get better. In 2027, folks, he still has 2 years of high school basketball remaining. And he's a top 10 player. What more do you want? You can't make that up. You're not faking that at all. He's a top 10 player in the class of 2027. And the Hoosiers are on him, and they want him. And the Indiana Hoosiers and Coach Darren DeVries are not backing down. He's from the state of Texas. Doesn't matter. Oh, he's already been offered by Tennessee and Auburn. I mean, we don't have a chance. Wrong. Indiana doesn't care. Indiana doesn't care. And that's such a big deal. So I'm going to continue talking about these guys. When Indiana offers them, we'll talk about them. When Indiana gets them on campus, we'll talk about them. When Indiana makes it into the top 5 or the top 3 or the top 2, we'll talk about them. And then ultimately, when Indiana starts landing commits for 2026, 2027, and beyond, we here at Locked On Hoosiers are going to talk about them. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you so much for being here. What a great show we had today, talking football, talking basketball, recruiting. Make sure, if you haven't already, to like the video on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comments, and subscribe to the channel, okay? And if you're listening on audio, again, subscribe, follow us, notifications, and send it to everyone you know, all right? We are back tomorrow, Hoosier fans, for another episode. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.